How do we equip our families with a biblical worldview? How do we prepare the next generation for life? How do I grow in my walk with the Lord and in my marriage? If you wrestle with these questions, you are in the right place to find answers. Welcome to the Entrusting the Faith podcast. Welcome to the Entrusting the Faith podcast. I'm your host, Eric Rutherford, and I'm excited today because I have with me Reed Hermstad. He is founder and executive director of 4Gens, which is an international ministry focused on equipping and encouraging children to be disciples of Christ. Also engages families to be disciplers not only of their children, but also grandchildren and future generations. And Reed's been, spiritually coaching families for over 30 years, one-on-one, group, and virtual formats. So just a wealth of experience and knowledge. Two quick items before we get to our interview. First, if you go to our website at entrustingthefaith.com, scroll down to the bottom, sign up for our weekly emails so you know who is coming up on the podcast for the week and who you may have missed the previous week. You'll also get a free resource when you do, and you can find all our other podcasts on our website while you're there. Feel free to scroll through them, find other interviews to really help you along the way. Second, this episode is just brought to you by my book, Leading While at Home, How Husbands and Fathers Can Biblically Lead Their Families. So if you've ever thought, man, I want to be a godly husband or father, I don't know where to start, or you've heard that you need to do something to equip your family, but you just don't know where to begin, well, if this is you or anybody Leading Well at Home will show you how you can love Jesus Christ, love and serve your wife and children, and take responsibility for discipling your family. You'll be encouraged and given action steps that you can apply so that you're moving forward. Okay, now let's jump into today's episode. Reed, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Eric. It's great to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm glad you accepted. And so I definitely want to get to 4Gens today and what that is. But before we do, would you just share with the audience a little bit about, your background and kind of what got you to 4Gens?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I came to know Christ in a powerful way when I was 25. And I actually, soon after that, ran into my first mentor as a guy named Bob Glockner. He's a navigator. And he so poured into me and poured into my family. And his wife all of a sudden took over and kind of started mentoring us. And then I had a whole string of them beyond that, Eric. And what I realized was that these people were investing in me so I could turn around and invest in others. And so I left my career when I was like 44. I was in high-tech sales and marketing and whatnot. And I couldn't stand it anymore, Eric. I had to go do something with meaning. And so my wife's kind of like, yeah. And so, but I did that. And what ended up is we ended up with about a 7-year in the desert experience trying to understand what the Lord wanted. But what he finally directed me towards was kind of looking back. And then looking back and understanding where I came from and who I was, I could extrapolate that to move forward. And what he really showed me, he went way back to John Hermstad, my great-grandfather in Trondheim, Norway, how he came here, how he came to know Christ. It was a powerful conversion. But then what he did with his family, and then his children, his grandchildren. And then when I came along, he had been gone for a long time, but I know exactly who he is. I know exactly what he's done. And what's grieved my heart is that we're losing a generation here, and we've got to engage and to help them come to know Christ and to walk this life of faith and then pass it on to their generations as well. And that's where I'm at today. And that's what the Lord's been directing over these years, over these decades, I guess.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's beautiful and so powerful because it can't just stop with us.
No.
Right. Yeah. And so then for what is 4Gens spelled, and that's the number 4 and GENS for those who are listening. Is that correct?
That's correct. And all it stands for is 4 generations. We will help you reach your 4th generation for Christ, whether you're around or not. We'll help you reach them.
Oh, that's awesome. That and I think especially in the U.S. Or in the West, we don't think that far ahead naturally or normally. I mean, we barely get through this week, and so I like that. So what what problem really were you trying to solve? Was it that giving people a bigger vision, or what was that?
Yeah, kind of both. The whole idea is we need to give a vision to these people to be able to pour into their families. And the problem that we're seeing here, especially in our society today, is that there's this abdication, if you will, of this spiritual training to the local church, or maybe not even doing it at all. And that happened back in the 50s. We saw a real switch where the church was starting to say, bring your kids in, we'll take them out of the main service, we'll put them into these programs and we'll run with it. And by the way, I've worked for years in those programs. I mean, they're wonderful, but the responsibility is still at the parent. And so what our problem is that saw is that the parents were letting go. The parents were moving away. By the way, the grandparents were really moving away, almost being taken out of the nuclear family and viewed as something else. And this shield up with the parents about not dealing spiritually with the children, big problem. And so we said, okay, we have to work in order to equip and enable parents, meaning grandparents, guardians, foster parents, whatever, Eric, to engage and take the responsibility for the spiritual welfare of these children, and then teach them through doing it with them how to do it with their next generation and moving forward.
Oh, that's really important, because I can see that as well. Just that idea of outsourcing to the local church everything, and it's like, hey, they're the professionals, right?
Yeah, it's really funny, Eric, because when I worked at Woodman Valley Chapel here in Colorado Springs, wonderful church, but with the middle school program, and we'd see these parents, for the most part, drop their kids off and go on a date, and then they come back and they pick them up. But the parents that were engaged actually there with the kids were the ones where we saw the real spiritual fruit happening within the parent's life and the child's life, and this generational move, because they were engaged. The church was a tool of theirs to use with their child, not the other way around.
It's true. And that's one of those things where if we can either serve with our children, or they at least see us doing that, and we have those overlaps, I think it does. It pays dividends. It's and I think too, I think a lot of people miss out on that. Yeah. Whether it's like, oh no, I either can't, or I won't, or I've paid my dues kind of deal.
Yeah, it's really true. It's really true. Yeah. Especially grandparents, they're down in Florida or Arizona or whatnot, and they're golfing and they're eating and becoming sleek and everything else, but they're kind of disengaged. And that grieves my heart, because the grandparents are so loved and trusted by these children up to a certain age. Okay. We got a time period here, but they need to engage there, and there's a wealth of experience and love and calmness, and that sometimes the parents don't have, just because they're trying to do life, right?
No, and I agree with that, because I remember, so my kids are basically 16, 15, and 11. And so they're at a different stage than when, the oldest was like 7, right?
Yep.
And at that young age, you're just trying to make it to bedtime. And so
I love it. Yeah.
It is. You're just thinking, oh man, I just want everybody, if I can get everybody safely to bed at night, it was a win. And so, that's a great time for those grandparents to be able to build in to those kids.
Yeah, hugely.
So what, as in sort of in your mind and the way you look at it, and scripturally, what do you think? What is family ministry and family discipleship, and what should it look like?
I agree. And so I've mentioned this earlier, but what it should look like is, this is one of the main parents' jobs in being a parent, period, is to actually have the privilege of pouring into the child and guiding him to the Savior where there's life. This morning I was praying about our meeting, and I was in Joshua 1. I love Joshua, by the way, but it says here that, it's in verse 9, chapter 1, verse 9, it says, "This is my command, be strong and courageous, Joshua. Do not be afraid. Don't be discouraged, for the Lord God is with you wherever you go." And then before it says that in verse 8, study this book of instruction, continually meditate on it day and night, so that you be sure to obey everything written in it. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all you do. And that's exactly what we want as parents. We want them to prosper and succeed in everything. And here in the book of Joshua, way back, we find out how to do that. But we need to be intentional. We need to be engaged, and we need to walk this journey with them. And one thing, Eric, I want to talk about whenever you want to bring it up, but just giving them or having a vision as a parent where, okay, my child is 7, to use your example. Okay, what do we want to see within them spiritually at 10? What is it? Because if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? And it's okay, back at 7, you're like, okay, so what are we going to need to do in order to accomplish that? And then you start praying about it and you start looking for things. And
no, I love that. Let's talk about that a little bit more. So do you have like benchmarks, so to speak, of where you want people to be, or where, or not necessarily you, but where it would be good for children to be, so as people are listening to this, maybe they've never even thought of that before. And they're like, oh yeah, I'd really like to, that makes so much sense. Would you elaborate on that and kind of go into that a bit?
Well, I would. And first, I just want to preface the whole thing by saying the best way to do that is to ask them, okay, say they're 7, what do you want to see at 10? What do you think, where do you think they should be at 10 and 12 and 14? Those are our benchmarks that we use, really those 3. Because and the parents, sometimes they go, I have no idea. I don't know. And that's fine because you've asked, right? But some might have some stuff and it might be a little goofy or whatever, Eric, whatever. And just write it down. But then, for example, I got a couple things here that we kind of look at is, for example, with a 10-year-old is, do they understand what really the term belief means? John 3:16, we're to believe. That's a big word, right? Pistio, or if you will, in the Greek, it's a big word. And so, okay, at 10, the child can cognate on that, and maybe 8, depends on the child, right? Depends on the child. So that might be one thing. 14, let's look at that one. We have some things like, well, we know for sure they're regenerate, they're born again. I mean, it's very strong. They know their testimony and they can give it. Fascinating. Also, there's a strong commitment to prayer. At 14, you've taught them to pray, and they realize the power of prayer, and they're actually doing prayer. They know how to share their faith. It's because we have this evangelism thing, but it's like we've never really been taught how to do it. And a parent is the absolute best person to say, well, here's a good question to ask people. Just say, hey, do you have any kind of faith? Just start there and get the conversation going. But who teaches them that? And I would say to you, the parent does. And by the way, they've probably watched the parent do it as well. And so a couple other benchmarks is a 10-year-old, I think they should have a good handle on the layout of the Bible. Here's the Old Testament, here's the New Testament, here's some of the main stories. But then you move into the 10-year-old age, or maybe even to 12, I think they need to understand, okay, what is God's plan here? Going to Ephesians 1, everything comes together under Christ. And then who are we? Ephesians 1:13, well, we've received the Spirit, we have this inheritance. I think they should really start cognating on those things, Eric. And I think that kids are more than smart enough nowadays to do that. I've had this thought in my mind where, when I went sometimes into the middle school programs, I thought it was too light. This is Christianity light. We need to wrap up Christianity like a grenade and throw it at them and hoping some holy shrapnel will sink deep into their flesh. We need to, Eric. We need to be intentional and to really understand that they can handle way more because they're getting it at school with all this garbage they're getting right now. And we need to act accordingly.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And that's because my wife and I, we've been involved with 6th graders for about the last 5 years, and at our church, and teaching a class and working with them. And one of the things we do is we set the bar high on knowledge.
Yeah.
And we figure some of them are going to get it and some of them aren't, but that's okay. But they might get some of it. But if we at least give them a grid to work with or some rails to run on, they can step up to it. We don't want to sort of dumb it down or dilute it because it's too important.
Really too important. And what we really want, thank you for doing that, by the way, that's wonderful. What we really want is we want this dialogue. We want this debate. If they get a little hot under the collar and we're having this big conversation and it's getting a little tense, I love it. we need to go there. This is not easy stuff sometimes. And let's not treat it that way.
No, I agree. And I think too, it's those situations where making it safe to ask those questions too.
Yeah.
Because it's not always safe, but if you can create that environment where somebody can, you're talking about faith and you're talking about faith alone in Christ, and they're like, yeah, how do you get there? It's one of, I love it when they throw it out.
Fabulous, isn't it? Yeah, I had this group of 7 to 9. They were more 8 and 9 ninth graders, excuse me. And we were going to do a survey of the Bible for that year. And we started off in Genesis, and we got right to the creation story. And Eric, we never left. They were so interested in dialoguing on it. Here's what they're hearing in school. Here's what school's telling them. And they're throwing this out, and we're arm wrestling over these different issues. It was spectacular. And I think it was exactly the right time to do it because they were getting it at school.
I love that. I love being able to go deep, to meet them where they're at, just that open dialogue. But then, then that sort of, and this may be a two-parter because I want to ask about P elements.
Sure.
That on that, that the organization does.
Sure.
And at the same time, there's that question of, okay, if I'm a parent and I hear these benchmarks for, 10 and 12 and 14 right, and what that looks like, but like, I don't even know how to get my kids to that. So maybe maybe that's the same kind of answer. I don't know. So I'm going to throw both those out there and let you run with them.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because in giving them a vision, King James, Proverbs 29:18, people perish for a lack of vision, right? In giving them a vision, you have to also give them a way to get to the vision. I mean, that'd be just hurtful not to do that. So what we did was when one of my spiritual mentors, Rick Drank, wonderful man, he had designed something called the Essentials for Spiritual Growth. And what it is, it's the foundation of faith. This is 1 Corinthians 3:10-14 stuff. And so they take apart in this course, they take apart all that whole belief system, intellectually, emotionally, choice, all that kind of stuff, and then put it back together. Foundation is Christ with the child. And it's discovery learning. So they're not teaching the child. This is all questions and getting the child to come up with it themselves. There's a thing that we say here at 4Gens that if they discover it for themselves, it'll be theirs. And they'll run with it like a football, the Super Bowl, they'll run with it because it's theirs, not because it's yours. Mm-hmm. And so we go through the foundation, then we build a framework of faith on top of that foundation, like your relationship with God. God loves you very much. And you have to have a proper perception of that. The Bible, veracity of it, all that kind of stuff. Forgiveness. Who's the Holy Spirit? How do you live this Christ-centered life, including prayer, for example, and repentance and all that kind of stuff. And so you give the parents a vision, a guideline of a suggestion of where they should be, the child at a certain age, and then give them that tool. Now, what we did too is, I look at the kids, I'm like, okay, where are the kids? Well, we know that the 15 to 20-year-olds are spending 2,736 hours a year on their phones, more than full time. So you could think, okay, 15 and under, probably still a lot of time on their phones. Highly graphic, highly videoized. And so that's what we did with P elements. We actually built it. I took Essentials, made it age appropriate, and put it on an application. So that then I say to the parents, all right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take your phone, where my phone went. I want you to take your phone. I want you to, when your kid comes out of the bathtub and they're smelling good and all that kind of stuff, sit on the bed with them before they go to bed, because they like to talk before they go to bed, and do it right here on the phone. And then if there's an essay question, you just hit the dictate button, and you just dictate the answer. If there's multiple choice, if you watch the videos, there's gamification, game stuff on it to keep track, and they get little medals and all this kind of jazz. I know it sounds hokey, but the kids love it. And every lesson, sorry, I'm pointing at you. Every lesson is 23 minutes because the kids kind of check out after 23 minutes. And that's the lesson. And so we go through this foundational framework. And then so the parents can do that because there's virtual tutorials from me on every lesson. But what we really want them to do is to get on Zoom like you and I are doing with a group of people that are all doing it together. Because the first part of the meeting is, okay, let's debrief. How did it go? And they go, well, my kid fell asleep, or my kid, we got off on this tangent, or, whatever. But then we table it, and it's the groups, right? They say, Reed, what should we do? And I'm like, well, what do you want? What do you think you should do? I mean, let them figure it out, right? And by the way, I give them tips, don't get me wrong. And but then we go through the lesson that they're going to do next week with the child, and then they go home and do it with the child, and then they come back again. And so we're talking about like a middle school class, if you will, or Sunday school class at church. It's a great place to do that. It's a great place to do it. Another option is we can do one-on-one with them if they want, like a Zoom call like you and I are doing here, and do the same procedure basically, but more one-on-one. And some people like that. Maybe they don't have time to do a group. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really cool that you've built the app. You've really, I want to say, almost translated it into their learning language or learning method, instead of trying to force like paper text onto them, and when it may not resonate with them.
That's not their world. That's circa 1950, for crying out loud. That's not their world. Their world is this stuff. And we need to go where they're at, not where we're at, Eric.
I like that. Sorry, I pointed right at you.
I love it. That's funny. That's funny.
But that's, I think that's where, and I'm going to, because I'm 47, I'm old. And so.
You're a pup, by the way, but whatever. Yeah.
I don't feel that way, but it's one of those things. Okay. But it's one of those things where, as we get older, we want the younger generation to change to us.
Yeah.
But what you were talking about is absolutely true. We need to go where they are just. That's what evangelism is. If we're going to the nations and we're going cross-culturally anyway, if we're going to Asia and Africa, we're not, Lord willing, not bringing our culture to them. We're trying to engage with them on their terms.
That's exactly right. And it's, I think of Peter, or Jesus with calling Peter. How do you do it? Through fish. Peter was a fisherman. Peter could understand fish. And I think these kids, we've got to just be careful, because that's their world, and let's go there. And if it looks different than ours, Eric, well, that's the way they do it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well,
yeah,
God doesn't care, I don't think.
No, I think it's just all about him and his word, and his truth, and just building on that.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
I agree 100%.
Let me ask, what makes it so important for older generations in our churches to connect with younger generations? Because you talked about the 4 gens. So we've talked about sort of that nuclear family, parent to child. Right. So let's go like a step beyond, and we can either go grandparents, or even, I'll say, grandparent age to those not their grandchildren or children, even within that. What makes it so important for people to do that?
By the way, the question's at 10. It's really a good one. And my whole take on this is that if you want to reach the child, you have to reach the parent. If you want to reach the parent, you have to reach the child. And to assume that parents spiritually know all this stuff, they understand the foundation, framework of faith, blah, 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 I think would be a disservice. And so if we want to make disciples of a parent or grandparent or foster parent or whatever it may be, this is a great way to do it, because it's discovery learning. The parent or grandparent's not there teaching the child. No, they're learning right with them. And they're like, the child goes, well, what do you think? And grandparents like, I don't know. We better go find out. I don't know, and we really make sure that with parents and grandparents, is saying, I know sometimes is words of love to the child, because you're coming down to their level and you're doing this together. And so why is this so important? Because they both need it. That's the bottom line. They both need it. And then the grandparent, Lord willing, can go to another child and do it all over again. And you just got to remind them, remember, it does discovery learning. You're both learning it. And then the whole idea with parents and grandparents and doing this is more teaching them questions about how to ask questions, how to draw it out of the child. And by the way, maybe sometimes that's both of them. Okay. And they need to go to somebody else, or maybe chat on we got a little chat box on Elements, and just ask, right? And we'll give them some tips. So.
No, I like that learning together, really engaging together, and both parties are like, okay, let's see what we can find out. I like that, and how it puts everybody sort of on equal footing.
Yes. And what's really funny is I've discipled a lot of different guys in my days, and then I've discipled many pastors. And who are the people that are most interested in doing it and doing it the right way? Pastors. They know all this stuff, by the way, like Kevin Harper. Kevin knows all this stuff, but Kevin will be the first one to do it and enjoy it and talk about it and dig into it. It's the craziest thing. And you'd think that they wouldn't do it, but no, it's just the opposite. They really like it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So
it's crazy.
what do you think keeps people who are part of an older generation from mentoring or discipling people who are part of a younger generation? So it could be parents to children. It could just be boomers to Gen Xers. It could be, widower, whatever. What do you think keeps them from engaging one another?
That's a big question. So the easy one first is sometimes they feel like they just don't know and they don't have anything to give. And that's where explaining to them elements and how to do it. And here's the process, and we'll walk through it with you, is critical, because then they start feeling like, oh, so I could do this. Oh, yeah, you have something to offer. You really do. The other one is a little bit more insidious, and that is we're seeing a wall, if you will, with the parents and the grandparents, where maybe the one parent married a non-believer, for example, just as an example. And they don't want the grandparents interfacing on a spiritual basis with the children. Eric, we see it a lot. And it's like the grandparents want to engage, but they feel like they're being inhibited, that their children, not the grandchildren, but their children don't want them to do it. And that's where, if you have like a group of grandparents sitting around doing this together, I can guarantee you that will come up, and that'll have to be tabled, and they'll have to, or not tabled, but discussed. They'll have to discuss as to how do we do this. And we may have to give them some tips on that one from other groups that we listen to.
Yeah, that's hard.
It is hard because it's not the grandkids. Grandkids want to interface with grandma and grandpa. By the way, what we've seen, which is kind of interesting, we have some good friends that have done this, is their children, the parents, want them to babysit the grandkids, but they don't want to talk about Christ, right? Well, the grandparents are like, listen, if you want us to watch your kids and the kids are in our household, they're gonna hear about Jesus. They're gonna sing the songs. They're gonna know them. And you know what happens, of course. They go home and the kids right to the parents, they tell them about this stuff. But if the parents want the grandparents to watch them, they kind of go, okay, well, that's gonna happen, right? Interesting.
I like that. I like that is sort of I say sort of a way around, but it's a way of saying I cannot deny, the gospel. I can't deny Christ. I can't deny what is most important, in this lifetime and beyond.
Well, and as we read in Joshua, God says, be strong and courageous. We're not called to be wimps. No, this is important.
It is. Now let me ask this, kind of piggybacking on that a little bit. So how does prayer fit into all this? So, between generations, because you've got some really cool stuff with that too. And what can we do to pray in a more effective way?
Yeah. By the way, I think everything by prayer. I read the book. My mentor gave it to me years ago. And I firmly believe it, that we have access to the throne room of God, for crying out loud. Why aren't we there petitioning hard for these children and talking to him about it? Because he loves them. He loves them. So the second part of your question is, we came up with this thing because when I was praying, this came out of my prayers, I guess, I'd ask the Lord about something, and then I'd pray about it until he kind of gave me an answer. And sometimes it wasn't a full answer. It was like, kind of just steps that came to mind that I needed to do. And so we came up with it's called the black and blue method, kind of black and blue. And so what you do is you sit down with a book and you write the prayer request in black ink. And then as you pray for it, or you date it. And then as you pray for it, we just put little ticks, 1, 2, 3, 4 / just little tick marks. And then as the Lord answers and you have this dialogue going on, you write the answers in blue, date them and everything else. And so you may have a couple pages worth of here's your black one. And then here's this conversation with Christ, right? Basically in prayer. And then all of a sudden one day it's done. The answer's there. You don't need to pray about it anymore, Eric. It's done. You put an X. And so what we've done is we've kind of packaged that up. We came with a neat little book with black and blue on it. And I've said to these guys, especially the grandparents, I had one, Kevin, really interesting. I said, well, you need to be praying with your kids, because he wasn't doing anything with his grandkids. And I said, well, start with your kids and just sit down and see if they do this prayer thing with you. He goes, really? Yeah. I said, just try it. So he bought a bunch of books and he went to all of his kids. I think he had 4 or 5 of them or something like that. And they're all there, and their spouses, by the way, and they were all up for it. So he had separate books for each kid and his wife, right? Or her husband, however it worked. And then he turned around, he did it with his grandchildren. So we had to make, we actually really have to come up with smaller books that have flowers on them or whatever for the kid, right? But the kids are really into it. They're like, okay, you're praying for me? And they'll call them up and say, hey, grandma, can you pray this? And the grandma will write it down. Sure, I got it. But the idea is that they do that with the child. They fill up the book and then they give the book to the child. And what they've just done, Eric, they've just taught the child how to pray. They've just given them the template. And by the way, the child for the rest of their life, maybe their generations, have the prayer book. Here's how grandma prayed. Here's how grandma prayed. Here's grandma's answers to prayer. Wow. Or here's dad's, right? Here's dad's. Anyway,
wow.
Yeah, very
That's
sweet.
Brilliant.
Very sweet, right? And the whole idea, I'm sorry. The whole idea is that you're tapping into the power source, I believe, the God who loves us, who wants these things and will make the paths straight. But we have to ask. I'm sorry, that's too strong. We want to ask. So.
No, I think that's an incredible idea, because, I've written things down before, and then prayed about it, but it's the writing the answers down.
Yeah.
As you go, because I forget all of the wonderful things that God has done to the prayers that I have asked. And so I like that you distinguish them, right, black and blue. You keep a running tally, and then you date it, and it's just evidence.
Well, and the other thing is, I tell them too, is if you're having a rough day, which we all have, a rough week or whatever, we all have. Well, just pick up the book and look at the blue. Just look at the blue. Just, look at what he's said. Look what he's promised. Look at these verses that come to mind. Look at, whatever's written. Right? Look at that. And then you'll feel better, right? You'll feel better.
It is, because sometimes, I feel like, and I know it's not true that I feel distant from God, right? So I know I haven't changed positionally with him, but our emotions, our feelings, we're under attack, all that good stuff. And so then you forget.
Yeah.
So
you do.
We all do. So I like, and so that's why I like that idea. You can go back and you can see. Yes. God's here, even when I don't feel it.
Yeah.
Even when he doesn't seem like he's like right next to me. He hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah. Maybe we have, but he hasn't.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. So let me ask, as for people listening, what do you think 1 or 2 things we can prayerfully consider implementing? I'm going to say broadly, I'll say either at home, in our churches, both, however you want to, however they're listening, to help build this family discipleship pattern. So a couple of suggestions that you would have.
Well, and by the way, I think the first one is probably the obvious one, where it's like, okay, get on your knees and just ask the Lord, what do you want me to do for you with this family and my future generations? What do you want? Because this is all about him. And then maybe write it in black, and then wait and see what he does. And then some of these things that we've talked about today, Eric, I put them down into prayer and say, should I do a prayer journal? Do you want me to meet with them and to disciple them? What do you want me to say to the parents? Things like that. Another thing I would say is, okay, what tools do I have? Remember where, the feeding of the 5,000, what does Jesus ask? He says, what do you have? Well, we got a couple fish and some loaves, which wasn't going to touch it. But maybe we need to ask, okay, Lord, here's what I've got. I've got this idea. I got this. I can't think of anything else, but this is what I have. I think Jesus will go, okay, we can work with that. Or he'll bring something else, right? And in the end, it'll be his.
Yeah, and that makes sense. That's very practical. Like, anybody listening, you can just start praying today. You can start asking those questions. You don't have to go out and do all kinds of crazy stuff. Like you say, it's just, what do you have?
Yeah. I think sometimes we've got to just relax, step back and pray and then watch. And I think we are. I'm blown away because he does stuff. He brings people that you would never think to even go there. I was on my knees recently, with elements saying, Lord, I just need to get this to more people. What do you want me to do? So I started some digital marketing stuff and kind of goofing around. And all of a sudden I got your text. Hey, would you mind doing a podcast? And I'm like, where did that come from, Eric? Out of the blue. No, the Lord prompted it. And I'm like, oh, praise God. Thank you. What a gift.
It is. And I like that. It's the hard part in there is the waiting and the watching. And so I think we just need, and there, I like that, the writing it down is like, okay, it's okay that it's been 8 days or 80 days. We just keep asking and waiting to see what he does.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I got it on the floor here. I should grab it for you. But one of my prayer journals for 4Gens, I use paper clips. Sounds kind of goofy, but I've got all these ideas and all this stuff. And so I just paper clip where they are. And then when I pray them, I can just flip the paper clip, you know what I mean? And go to that page. It just makes it a lot easier because, I'm sure you do too. You got a bunch of things you're praying the Lord about. I mean, it's not just one thing.
I think it's brilliant. Yeah. Or I'll tear apart, or use a little bit of sticky notes, or I'll tear sticky notes up and you just, anything to bookmark it.
Yeah. Just that. And just go there. Yeah. And I just leave the paper clips in there. And
I love
my wife bought me some color paper clips, whatever. So,
I love that. I love that. Now, just as we kind of wrap up, one last question. So everybody listening, they've gotten some great information. They've gotten some great encouragement. Is there any one takeaway or action step that you would like to encourage people to do today? Just like one, like if they only get one thing, and there's a whole lot here. So my prayer is that they get more than one thing. Yeah. But if there's just one, what would you encourage them with?
Yeah. And I'd say to the audience, please engage. This is one of those kind of tasks where it doesn't have to be pretty, but it has to be done. And the Lord has equipped you to do it. And so engage. And if you need help, if you need any kind of encouragement, whatnot, listen to Eric's podcast, check out 4Gens if you'd like, or there's a lot of other things there, but please engage. This is a critical issue that needs to be addressed.
Indeed. So if you're listening, definitely encourage you to do that. And then read for people who want to know more about you, want to learn more about 4Gens. Where would you like them to go?
Yeah, please just go to our website. It's it's the number 4, GENS, short for generations.com. So www.4gens.com. And we got a lot of information in there. And if you'd like to chat further, we got a chat box and whatnot. And we'd love to engage.
Excellent. So if you're listening, 4gens.com with the number 4, we're going to put that in the show notes so you can check it out if later on. So Reed, thank you so much. This has been just a fun conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it.
If you found this episode helpful, please leave a review for us wherever you listen to podcasts. Doing so will help others to find us. Check out the show notes for resource information. We encourage you to do that for links and other references. We'd like to hear from you, so you can message us your questions or comments on Facebook, Instagram, at Entrusting the Faith. You can email us at info@entrustingthefaith.com. If you go to our website, which is www.entrustingthefaith.com, you can sign up to our email list and receive free resources as well as upcoming podcast episode information. So check it out. Lastly, just remember, legacies are built a day at a time. So start now.